Hey, look out. It's Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
You're watching Facebook Live or YouTube Live. There on the screen, Gary Thomas and Debra Fileta.
Fileta, very good. You got it right.
Did I do okay?
You did fabulous.
You know, I stress over names. I'm just going back. That's why we asked beforehand. These guys have a book out, yeah, we're going to talk about it. It's called Married Sex, a Christian Couple's Guide to Reimagining Your Love Life. Wow. Well, we don't just have to spell it, as we talked about earlier. We do need to talk about it. I want to know, when you guys decided to put this together and you shared it with maybe your publisher or your friends, what was the reaction? What reaction? Well, Gary, you have a great reaction there. Let's go with you. What reaction did you get?
Well, it's always embarrassing. People are always asking me, what's the title of your next book? And I didn't know this one man very well. And so he said, what's the title of your next book? And so I just kind of swallow and say Married Sex. And his response was, isn't that an oxymoron? And I was thinking, that's exactly why we need to write the book.
Yes. Good point.
That is so good. Debra, how about you?
Yeah, this book was such an important topic because we spend so much time, especially as Christians, talking about what not to do before marriage.
Yeah.
And then somehow we're supposed to magically have a thriving sex life after marriage. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. So we just need to have more conversations. And I appreciate you having us on for this courageous conversation.
Yeah, it is. And we do, we try to skirt around the issue, not Dan and I and our listeners and the folks that we have on. But I think as a Christian culture, we like, okay, all right, well, we can talk about it for just a little bit, but let's not get into too much detail. We really need the details because this is an important part of a healthy, let's be honest, our relationship with our spouses. So where do we begin with this? When you guys got together for this, what was the purpose? Is this just for married folks? Or do you think this would be a great book for those that are getting ready to tie the knot as well?
Well, I think the goal is for married couples or those who are close to marriage, engagement stage, moving towards marriage. If you're single or, marriage is nowhere on the radar, I think this is a conversation and a book that you can wait for. But I think the bottom line is, as you're moving towards marriage and as you're in marriage, some couples have been married for 10, 15, 20, even 50 years and still aren't comfortable having conversations about sex. So this book is going to be a guide to help walk you through some really important topics about intimacy, about pleasure, about your desire, your needs. And not only that, digging a little bit deeper and talking about the health of your relationship as well.
Rick, sex is so multifaceted that we wanted to produce a book that could address people from all walks of life who are Christians. Debra's been married just for 15 years. Lisa and I, 37. So we could talk to younger couples and older couples. As a licensed counselor, she can deal with the relational issues. I get into a lot of the theology because sometimes what holds us back from a thriving physical relationship are theological misunderstandings or not really recognizing how God celebrates sex. Sometimes it can be a relational issue. Debra deals with that. How do you know if it's a relational issue or a sexual issue? Sometimes it can be a physical issue. Sex is a physical sport. There's certain physical skills that we would do well to master. And then a lot of times it's just because you've gotten bored and in a routine, and it's not the kind of thing you want to talk about in a small group. That would be a little bit embarrassing, perhaps even inappropriate. But we interviewed or polled and talked with almost 1,000 couples where we could get practical tips, put them in an anonymous forum, change the names, remove any identifying details, so that couples, whatever the issue that might be holding them back, maybe theological misunderstandings, relational issues, physical incapabilities, or just a lack of new ideas, they could find it here in Married Sex.
So what kind of difference would this make? Because both of you counsel with people and I'm sure with couples in marriages. What kind of difference would this make if people would read this and be comfortable talking about it before they get into marriage and learn how to deal with these things? Would that decrease the number of people you're having to counsel later on after they've been married for a while?
Yeah, definitely. I think having more of these types of conversations and being comfortable is really a huge aspect of learning to communicate, and something that most of us go into marriage unequipped to do. Most of us go into marriage thinking this is awkward, uncomfortable. Some people even think it's wrong to have certain conversations or to say what they need. And, some people struggle with saying certain words, certain terminology. And so I think people don't even know where to begin. And so the goal is to help people get comfortable. The goal is to give them the terminology they need, the questions to ask, but also start today practical suggestions and tips. So for those of you who are married, this isn't just a book of information and theory and theology. There are chapter by chapter instructions. I mean, page by page, things that you can do today to start having conversations and to start putting some of these new things that you're learning into action. And I think it's going to really help a lot of couples and surprise a lot of couples as well.
The book's called Married Sex. I appreciate you guys being bold and going boldly where no man and women, really want to go. But, you want to help people, and I appreciate that. I looked at some of the things to talk about. Great sex past sexual prime. I think that the older I get, I'm like, hey, I'm not 20 anymore. And so I think that's an important issue to me as an older man, as an older, husband. Do you think this is generational at all? I mean, do you think, I don't know, the younger generation, as a 61-year-old, is the younger generation talking about this more than us older folks, or is it just this an issue with all generations?
Rick, it would astonish somebody of Debra's age, perhaps, to remember that there was a time when you could not say the word pregnant on national television, when husbands and wives would have to be in a different bed, when literally, if a school teacher in the grade school became pregnant, when she stopped showing, had to stop teaching until she delivered, because they didn't want Johnny and Susie to think that she might have done anything like that. I guess it would result in a baby. And so when you talk about people, and now we're going back to people really in their late 70s and 80s, that's the world they grew up in.
Yeah.
Till today, when you hear young girls singing songs with language that their great grandmothers had never even heard of and couldn't have imagined saying at their age.
Right.
There is a huge generational gap in the way that we talk about sex. A lot of sexual innocence has been lost. But what we're trying to do is help push it in a positive direction. If people are talking about this, how do we do it from a perspective that honors the creator of sexuality, that honors who we are as male and female, that respects the place of marriage where sexual relationships thrive and are protected and are healthy and holy and good?
Yeah, and I would add to that, this isn't just a matter of having more conversations and being more explicit. I mean, when you look at our world, we're really explicit with the topic of sex and sexuality. The problem is it's not rooted in God's word.
Yeah.
So just having more conversations, but not having healthier conversations isn't the solution. So we want to make sure that the conversations we're having are healthy and balanced and theologically correct, psychologically accurate, but also male-female balanced. I think sometimes we've had the conversations in the past that are one-sided. And so I think part of the reason I really appreciated being the co-author in this book is that it's not just a male-centric view. It's a female-focused. It's male-focused. It's such a balanced view looking at it from both sides of the equation.
So what are you guys hearing so far from folks that have read the book?
One of my favorite comments was a woman and her husband saying, I didn't realize that sex was so biblical. I mean, everything I learned in church taught me that it wasn't, and it was something we couldn't even talk about or do. And to realize that God delights in this, she's like, this is a book even my husband was excited to read. And so I love that people are just opening their eyes to that, the fact that God really delights in this subject, and this is for our good.
Yeah.
We believe, Dan, that this is a book of questions as much as answers. And I've loved it when I've heard couples that have read it together and they'll stop. And I'm literally repeating comments people giving me and say, is that true of you? Or, man, I didn't know that. Or just creating new understanding. I'm not going to call it universal. I don't know if anything is universal, but it is very common that's just a lot easier for couples to have sex than to talk about sex.
Yeah.
And Debra, as a counselor, has a great section in the book about ways to make it easier, when to do it, sort of how to do it, sort of how to couch it. But the idea is sometimes it's easier if you just read the chapters together and then you stop. So what do you think? And it sort of opens up the door for people to explore each other in new ways. And I was shocked when we started this book that Debra told me as a counselor how she could be talking with a couple married 10 or 15 years that never really have had a talk about this, what they find helpful, what isn't helpful, what could turn them on or what could turn them off. And we just want to get couples to have these healthy, God-honoring conversations that we believe will lift their marriage up on all levels, because it's not just about physical intimacy. To have the skills that build up physical intimacy, you're going to build up the marriage in its entirety.
Love that. The book is called Married Sex. You can go to marriedsex.us. We'd love to have you guys on next year after the holidays, because I don't think this is just a one interview thing. I think this is something we could talk about, on and on, because I mean, we're just not even scratching the surface, but it's good stuff. And I love that you talk about I mean, there are theological boundaries, physical, emotional relation, and you're covering all that. And that's so healthy that we all need to hear, that we all need to read the book and talk about it. So again, go to marriedsex.us. Great book, guys. Appreciate you. Merry Christmas. Love to get with you again in 2022. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.